What's going on, Bears fans? As you know, sports betting season is in full force right now, which means you need a sports book with integrity and longevity like BetUS. BetUS has been pioneers in the sportsbook industry for nearly 3 decades, thriving, paying you, the loyal customer. What's great about BetUS is they have loads of bonuses. So join now at betus.com today and receive a 125% sign-up bonus by using code Chicago125. BetUS has all your NFL games with team and player props and loads of NFL futures and odds. BetUS gives you options in addition to the NFL with college football games, PGA golf, UFC matches, the NBA, and more. They have every bet type imaginable, and the BetUS mobile platform is easy to use with full betting options. So follow my lead and get your phone, online, and social sports betting partner with integrity and longevity like I did. Cash in on your 125% sign-up bonus at betus.com today with our code Chicago125. BetUS. You bet, you win, you get paid. BetUS. What's going on, everybody? I'm Nicholas Moreano, and alongside me is Mason West. We're here in the stats booth here at Soldier Field to recap this Bears 16-13 loss to the Baltimore Ravens. 5th loss in a row, Mason. Just initial reactions. We've had some time to kind of just sit here and reflect on this. Honestly, a horrendous loss. But what's kind of your thoughts going on right now?
We were talking about this really second half of the game. What was the point of this game? We didn't get anything out of this, right? We didn't get Justin Fields' development. We didn't get to see like a comeback from the defense in terms of turning to true form. We didn't get to see. We didn't get anything out of it. It was a loss. It was Justin getting hurt, and now there's a short week and what's going to go on there. And then at the end of the day, it's maybe Andy Dalton boosting his resume for when he's a free agent next summer.
Yeah, so this was like one of those losses where, again, to your point, there's nothing to gain from it. Justin Fields didn't get better. The defense has shown more inability to not hold on to a lead. Second game in a row, you do it to Pittsburgh after the offense gives you the lead. Happens again in Baltimore with a backup quarterback in Tyler Huntley. So there's a lot more question marks around this team and just concerns now going into a 5-game losing streak. But we'll kind of start this off as we usually do with the first quarter of our show and what Will would typically do at Monster Moment. And I was going to say it would have been Andy Dalton's, game, I guess, it was supposed to be a game-winning touchdown, right, to Goodwin here. And now I think it's going to have to be just the 2 plays down here where it was a pass interference call to that was by Kindle Vildor down the right sideline, and then he followed it up with a big pass down the right sideline from Tyler Huntley. Oh, did you see? Okay, I think we need a move or something to get. Well, I think it's fine. We're just gonna have that's how this Bears season is going. Lights are flickering, and we're in the booth, so this is always fun. I can see that in the YouTube chat. Look at our faces.
Just like what the heck is happening?
So yeah, that's gonna be the monster moment. It's really it's the whole drive for the Baltimore Ravens, just taking the lead back when really they had no reason to do so. You just took the lead. Andy Dalton with a great pass to Marquise Goodwin, which you think is going to be the game winner. And even when that happened, Mason, we're like, what? Like, what's happening here with this Bears team? Like, they come back, and it would be so Bears if they gave it up. And that's exactly what they did. But Mason, I'm going to throw it over to you. What's the stat of the game? There's a lot of them.
There was a couple stats I was going to go with. If they had won, it would have been Robert Quinn's stat line, which as a whole was really good. Just to give you, a couple of those numbers, not going to get super heavy, but 3.5 sacks, 3 tackles for a loss, 4 quarterback hits. And that was a really good day in the office for a guy who most Bears fans, myself included, was like, get this guy out of here last year. But since they didn't win, and there's a little bit more to it. And again, this year is all about progression. I'm a broken record when I say that, and it's specifically progress from Justin. Take out the injury aspect of it, which we'll get into, but they were at one point 1 for 10 on 3rd down until that 1 3rd down conversion in garbage time over here. So they ended up at 2 for 11 on 3rd down. You compare that to an undrafted free agent, Tyler Huntley-led Ravens team was 7 for 16, 44%. Now, there's a lot that goes into that. Some of it's simply the coaching. Some of it is we looked at each other, for example, when Andy Dalton came in, had that pass to Jimmy Graham, and then all of a sudden had the screen to Darnell Mooney for a touchdown. And we said, where are those plays for Justin Fields? So if those plays maybe had been used earlier, Why would you not use it there? There goes the lights again. If Dave Montgomery didn't seem like he was as used in this game. You weren't playing from behind. Why were you not handing it to him? Khalil Herbert's been pretty much gone. Where were the tight ends all game? We lauded the Bears in that Steelers game, how well Cole Kmet did. Jimmy Graham contributed, things of that nature. You didn't even have Jesper Horsted active today, which I think spoke to a little bit about that. So the inability to put your team in a place that they can convert on third down, move the chains, and march downfield.
And you know what, Mason, what I'll go into for my segment as well, where I just rant about stuff. It's like, this is coming out of a bye week. And why is it that you have your starting quarterback in Justin Fields, you do lose him, but you saw that the Ravens were just more prepared to handle, adverse situations or situational football than Matt Nagy ever could have. You see, like, on the 4th down and 1 play where he's deciding, okay, there was miscommunication with the headset going off, but the offense comes out, they're about to punt, they take a timeout. You come out of that play, and we talked about this, a wildcat play where it's 4th and 1, there's no one else in the backfield. They're running up the middle with David Montgomery, and there's no – you're basically telegraphing exactly what you're going to do on offense. And, of course, they get stopped, and that was at the Chicago, I believe, 49-yard. They were on the Chicago side of the field, so Ravens take over. And that's just – it goes into coaching, decision-making, why you're not utilizing the tight ends at all in the first half, and just, out of time. The first play of the second half, false start for Cole Kmet. Like, that is so Bears. It's just so Bears, and I think as fans should just be tired of it. This is a loss that's unacceptable in all facets. And even for Matt Nagy and what he's shown consistently as the head coach of the Bears, this is unacceptable. You can't lose to Tyler Huntley at home when you have the lead, and you basically can't do anything on offense in the first half. It is unacceptable, and obviously that's why the Bears are now on a 5-game losing streak. Hey, one more. Thursday they can match that total of 6 games that they had last year, so we'll see what the Bears can do there. But, Mason, I think we're just going to leave this offensive portion of the podcast now going into the second quarter of the show here. We're going to leave it open. Where do we want to start with this offense? Because I think we saw – you mentioned it, like with Andy Dalton coming in, 2 plays, he scores a touchdown.
Right.
A whole half of football for Justin Fields after a second half in Pittsburgh where he was lighting up the Steelers defense. It looks so different. So where do you want to start with this?
I think you had to start with what they were doing initially, which was very different. They came out, they weren't using a lot of their heavy sets that they were using for a while. You didn't see a lot of 2 tight end stuff, 3 tight end stuff that you saw before. It was a lot of speed on the field, which is an interesting way to go when you're like, okay, we don't have Allen Robinson, so we're calling up Isaiah Coulter, who also I don't believe even saw the field unless I missed him. All of a sudden you have Jakeem Grant, who's getting a lot more playing time on that offense. You have Demir Byrd sightings every once in a while, not necessarily getting the ball, but he was on the field. And you were spreading things out, and which makes sense at least maybe initially because you're like, well, let's attack this Ravens defense, which ranked last in yards allowed. I believe it's 283.3, but then it wasn't really working. The route combinations still like a lot of hitches for whatever reason. I mean, why are you running a hitch with Demir Byrd? That doesn't really work. There wasn't as many crossing routes, and then Justin got a little antsy. There were times where he's definitely stepped out of the pocket sooner than he needed to. There was the one play, I believe it was in the third quarter, right before he went out for that rib injury, where he went to scramble, did a pump fake to David Montgomery, pulled it down and kept going. If he just dipped it to David Montgomery, he had one defender, and that could have been a first down there. The fumble, right? Like, yes, immediately tackles that beat off the edge. But at the same time, Justin, you got to protect the rock. I mean, he's had way too many fumbles. He's really lucked out and not really letting those actually get recovered by the opposing defense. But that's what was an issue too. So there's still the struggle of identity. Week to week, it seems like they are trying different things instead of seeing, hey, that this worked, let's build on it. We said at the top of the show, where were the tight ends? Cole Kmet didn't have a target in the first half. I believe Jimmy Graham's first target and catch was the Andy Dalton one. Mm-hmm. Why would that not be an emphasis in this game? Why is there not screens being used like they were? Like, I mean, it was only one screen, but the screen being used later in the game. This Ravens defense wasn't good. It's just odd. It's just smashing your head against a wall over and over and over again when it comes to this offense.
Yeah, and where I'll kind of take this is like when you look at the first half of this Bears offense, you had the 0 for 3 on third downs, no points. You had a drop by Darnell Mooney. You have the fumble by Justin Fields. You just have and look like just dysfunction, but there was really never any rhythm, like within the entirety of the game. Like when Andy Dalton came in, yes, you scored quick on the 2 plays. You have to score. You scored on some explosive plays, which is great to see the explosive plays, and they did have some attempts downfield, but we talked about it. The seam routes that worked so well in Pittsburgh, non-existent. You didn't even attempt those really in this game, especially in the first half with Justin Fields for some reason. And then you're using. We talked about on that first drive, like Jakeem Grant caught a pass, he ran the ball. The Bears still ended up getting 0 points, but it's just different. They tried to go. I don't know if they tried to be too cute. I don't know if that's the right way of describing it, but it just there just seems to be no flow with this off. And that's something that you could say almost every single game, every single year with Matt Nagy in the offense. But they knew what the Ravens were going to do, pressure the ball, and sometimes they were able to get that pressure with only coming with 4 of them. Play that Mason reference with the fumble. That was just done with four people rushing the passer. They were able to collapse the tackles. Justin Fields can't hang on to the football. That looked like a promising drive. You end up getting no points off of it. And like you said, David Montgomery should have been way more of a focal point in this game.
He had 14 carries.
14 carries in a game that was – it ended, 16-13?
1 for Khalil Herbert.
See, there's something – Matt Nagy's talked about it, like, and they've said, like, their identity is running the ball. This showed the exact opposite. This is a game where they should have done that.
Right.
Or at least attempted to do that. But for some reason, they felt more confident in trying to pass their way into a rhythm where there was never that consistency of trying to establish the run to set up other things.
How many rollouts did you see today?
See? Exactly. I can't even
how often did they say, hey, Justin, let's cut down half the field. We'll get a couple crossing routes, use our speed or our big bodied, tight ends on those drag routes, concepts across there.
Man.
I don't remember one. One doesn't stick out to me, at least.
No, one doesn't stick. I mean, on that first drive, you had a designed QB run, and it kind of seemed like on those plays, there was one it was either third or fourth drive where Justin Fields obviously left the game with a rib injury, but he was slow to get up along would be, I guess, our vantage point would be this left sideline here, but he got slow. He was slow to get up, but there wasn't really any of those design rollouts, those plays that he was having so much success with in Pittsburgh. Why is there this disconnect? I just don't freaking understand it. And then, so obviously this is a game where the Bears did not have Allen Robinson, but you saw Darnell Mooney, outside of the one drop on third down that I mentioned kind of earlier, a guy that can clearly make explosive plays, make people miss in open field for Andy Dalton on the screen.
It seemed like there was that one route that he ran kind of incorrectly for Justin. I think it was the second or third drive. I would consider at least 2 drops today on his end too. Like Moody's been a little off, it seems like, and that's where I'm concerned about the longevity of Mooney. Can he truly be a wide receiver 1? And so far, to me, the answer is no, because we haven't seen that consistency. Like if you're saying it's 3rd and 4, I need a first down, can you say with certainty that Mooney will catch the ball?
Yeah, I mean, he's had those question marks,
yeah.
Right, and that's why there's some hesitancy to say definitively yes he will. He did talk about that play in his press conference. He said Justin Fields came up to him, and they talked about it like they had not seen that type of look before in practice, and you know what that also goes into the coaching, right? Like they didn't see that one, and Justin was saying, hey, slow your route down a little bit. That's where Justin Fields was trying to go with the ball. But as he was saying that, he's like, yeah, we didn't really see that on film, or we weren't ready. Kind of, not that they weren't prepared for it, they just hadn't seen it. Well, I feel like you should almost, for any defense, expect the unexpected at times, but they just didn't see that look, incomplete pass, and, an opportunity lost ultimately for this Bears offense. But 13 points in this week, week 11 now? Five losses now in a row. I just don't know if this offense is – you have, a couple days to rebound for the Detroit game. We'll definitely talk about that later in the week. But there's just so many question marks as to why they did things they did, why they didn't do more of what had success a week or 2 weeks ago, I guess now. But question marks, and 13 points is not enough to – apparently, well, it should be enough to beat Tyler Huntley, you would think, but it just didn't end up being the case. Mason, is there any other talking points about this Bears offense? Anything that you want to highlight here?
I think the only other thing I would highlight is continuation a little bit of what you said before in terms of the coaching aspect of it, right? You had mentioned the questionable I'm going to punt it, just getting timeout, now I'm going to go for it, bad play design, all that stuff. And then if you fast forward a little bit to when they did actually score and now they needed to kick a field goal or an extra point, I should say, they needed to call a timeout during that extra point. And there are just time and time again these odd uses of timeouts, this odd choices to go for it, to not go for it. Like you said, the losses out of bye. It's like, what are you doing with all this free time? The losses to second string quarterbacks. You go back to, there's just so many that's happened in Matt Nagy's tenure. There's just poor choices, it seems like, being made on a day in, day out basis at Hallis Hall, and that shows in the field at Soldier Field.
It really does. And if you want, go try to listen to Matt Nagy's explanation on those timeouts. You're going to be like,
head will spin.
Yeah, that's when I heard it. Like, I think I just became dumber listening to that, no doubt. But look, we'll wrap it up there for this Bears offense. Let's go to the defense. Look, Mason, there were some individuals that I thought had some really good games. You mentioned Robert Quinn. I thought Eddie Goldman getting his first sack today had a good game as well. But there were also guys, and this has now been a trend for one individual in particular, and let's not even sugarcoat it. It's like Kindle Vildor is not just a liability, but arguably is like one of the worst corners in the league right now. I mean, again, I am not watching every single corner, but just seeing, again, the plays that are being made against Vildor and the yards she's giving up, and again, the spots that he's putting this defense, and maybe Sean Desai can do a better job of that. He probably can, to be completely honest, but at some point you need to make some plays, and he just can't.
Part I'm confused about the most when it comes to that situation is just technique and setup. So, because if it was consistently just him being burned, right? If he was up there jamming on a receiver and the receiver was getting by him every time, if he was falling down his back pedals, things like that, I would just be like, okay, Vildor is just not very good. Let's move on. But we mentioned this, the amount of cushion that not just Vildor, the Bears in general, but definitely Vildor tends to give. Is that a coaching point that Sean Desai or the secondary coach is giving him? Are they giving it to him because they don't think that he can play closer or else he will get burned? Because there are just so many times where he's so far off the ball that I don't care how fast you are not going to be able to get there and break up the pass. At best, you are hoping to make a tackle. And that's a recipe for disaster, even against someone of a Tyler Huntley, skill set. And Tyler Huntley showed he could put the ball in the area it needed to be, and the Bears lucked out. Then there were other times where there were a lot of drops, but honestly, they were bad balls. It was off the fingertips of tight ends and fullbacks and things of that nature. So really the Ravens' game plan was, where's Kindle Vildor? Let's throw it there. And that was on rinse and repeat for most of the game.
And you look at the last drive. And that's exactly what Mason just said. They were on the Baltimore 28 with 1:33 left in the fourth quarter, down 13-9. You get the pass interference call, 21 yards. Next play, down that same right sideline, it's a 21-yard reception. You're already in Bears territory in two plays. There's still 1:21 left in the fourth quarter. So they know, look, Tyler Huntley, a guy that was able to identify that despite not having obviously a lot of playing experience. And there was actually another play where, like, I think we had talked about it, Mason, where he got the Bears defense for too many men on the field. It's like, how Tyler Huntley
is able to do that, but then there's multiple times where it's like Justin thinks it's a free play and there's not a free play. That's happened 2 or 3 times now, and it's like, that is coaching. That is a coach probably, I would assume, in Huntley's ear, either right before the play, or it's happening during the week where it's coached up. Like, if this happens, this is what we need to do.
No, exactly. And actually, just to kind of get off track a little bit, like in this game, knowing who was out, you had Khalil Mack out, Akeem Hicks out, Allen Robinson was out, and you had Lamar Jackson on the other field out. You would have thought, based off of Pittsburgh's performance, Justin Field would be the best player on the field today. That was not the case. It wasn't the case, and maybe the coaching staff didn't put him in that position, but there were some missed throws from Fields. Obviously, the fumble hurts, and then he leaves the game injured. But at no point in this game did I think, hey, Justin Fields is the best player when he was clearly that in the Monday night loss to the Pittsburgh. So just kind of wanted to mention that real quickly as we're still talking about this Bears defense. I think a guy that we also need to highlight, and I just want to make sure I get all the stats right, because this man, I swear, every single play was being called. How many tackles did you say Roquan Smith had at one point?
At the half, he had 11.
He had 11. Man finished with 17 tackles in the game. Like, I think for Roquan Smith too, and like these are not tackles. These are not just routine. Like, let me bring the guy down. Like, he's punishing people.
He was laying the wood on some of these. Like, he was making them feel his presence every time he hit him.
No, and it was great to see that from Roquan Smith, because early on in this game, like we talked about it, so like we were seeing like that effort. You're seeing Eddie Goldman dive and extending to make plays. You saw how Robert Quinn was.
You highlighted that one sack, right?
Yeah, the sack, and then Robert Quinn, how he gets, is able to extend again to force the sack strip. Like, guys look like they were giving that effort, and I think as the game just went on, like there were certain individuals, Kindle Vildor, who just couldn't make a play for their team despite maybe 10 other guys doing the right thing. And actually, Robert Quinn was asked about that. It's like, is there going to be a time, like you're talking to the media like it's everyone's, we need to collectively do better as a defense, when, there are some individuals that just need to step up. Are you going to talk about that? And he's like, there's no reason to like sugarcoat it. It's like, we have to address these issues. So, yeah, I mean, those are some individuals that, again, some are trending up, some are trending down. But let's talk about Sean Desai, though, Mason. Because I know there's a few thoughts that you have about him. But what do you make of this loss? 16-13, Baltimore Ravens, and again, where the Bears had the lead, but they lost it.
I have not been very happy with Sean Desai's stratagems, coverage, all these things especially the end of halves and the end of games. There was one play in particular that really stood out. It was the pass up the right sideline, our sideline, I believe. If you're watching the game, it would be the opposite, where the receiver was just wide open. Closest person was, I believe, Deion Bush, and he was barely in the same zip code as him. And this is a situation where you're now you're not even in a full bend but don't break thought process. I mean, there's plenty of time on the clock. It's not like you're hoping that runs out. You need to truly make a stop. And the best I can tell, it's a blown coverage. Mm-hmm. That's how open the guy was. So that's been happening a lot. There's a lot of times where there's blown coverages, right? We saw it early in the year. There are times, Eddie Jackson's going back and talking to, maybe it was Kindle Vildor, and be like, where were you? Like, you were supposed to pass that off. But that does come down to coaching. Now, you look at some other games, like the Bengals game, the Raiders game, and they only let up, I believe, 9 points in that Raiders game. The defense was phenomenal. But, and we've talked about this, a big part of that defense has been the pass rush. Mm-hmm. And while the pass rush was good today, it wasn't so dominant that a Tyler Huntley wasn't able to sit back there and at times pick you apart. And, which is ridiculous. So at the end of the day, you need to scheme up your linebackers and defensive backs to be able to make up for not having a pass rush constantly hitting the opposing quarterback.
I agree. And like that the middle of the field for the Bears defense has been open all season. But there was a lot of times before Mark Andrews was dropping some passes, he was also catching them over the middle of the field. And just like, that's an emphasis. It's a nice window to throw into for a quarterback that doesn't have as much experience, and you're throwing to your tight end. So a kind of a security blanket, if you will. But it's just, there's still question marks clearly on Sean Desai. Wave your arms again, Nick. Keep the lights on. It just happens unexpectedly when it happens. It's already too late. But yeah, that's two weeks in a row now where the defense should have done its job. The offense, even though it had been inept for the first half in Pittsburgh, the first half in Baltimore, when it needed to in the fourth quarter, gave them the lead. Defense gave it up. So that goes on coaching, that goes on individual players not executing, and that just leads to the multitude of problems that we're seeing collectively on this Bears team. All right, Mason, is there talking about this Bears defense, anything else you want to highlight before we kind of get into the final portion of the show?
The only other thing I would say is, as we move forward, to look at this defense as what it is. It is the same thing essentially as the offense. It's the development of the young players. So is Roquan going to be an all pro finally this year? Is Jalen Johnson going to be not just a good cornerback? Can he be a great cornerback? Can he get more turnovers? Can he be someone that's a difference maker in a game besides you're not getting thrown at a lot? And you just kind of got to live with, is Kendall Villaware not going to be your cornerback next year? And it's like a waste of time to discuss him because, like, no offense, he's a great guy. I've talked to him before. He's cool to be around and all that. He's just not very good. I mean, he was okay in the slot before. Maybe he can get moved to the slot, but he's not going to be your cornerback 2 next year. Arguably, right? Is your safety tandem going to be the same next year? Are you going to have it's going to be different. So focus on the individuals that will be here for sure next year, and then the ones who are still trying to play their way to continue to be here next year.
And you know what, Mason, when you mention that, it's like, for me, when I think of like those core individuals on defense that are going to be here, it's like Jalen Johnson, Roquan Smith,
Travis Gibson.
Yeah. He does, but it's like, and then obviously Khalil Mack, because I think obviously with his contract stuff, obviously his year is over, and Robert Quinn has had an amazing year, but then it gets really murky for like core component guys on this defense. Again, why probably they're having the issues that they're having right now, and it's going to be a lot of things that need to be retooled. Like, you look on offense, you look on defense. You can add a couple. You would add a bunch of pieces.
I think that's the nice word though you use there, is retool, because it's not a crush it up, let's start all completely over, non-rebuild. Yeah, but retool.
All right, before we go into the final portion of our show, got to tell you about our partnership with Owen. If you're like me, going to the gym is a crucial part of my schedule. It's a place to let loose, just decompress, and after a great workout, it's important to get your body the amino acids it needs to repair and rebuild proteins. And that's why I drink Owen. Owen is a 100% plant-based protein company, and all of their products are, of course, plant-based, free of artificial ingredients, and are allergen-friendly. Plus, Owen uses high-quality and carefully selected ingredients to make all of its products easily digestible, like their dark chocolate protein shake that has 20 grams of protein, the Elite Pro that has over 30 grams of protein. Both fantastic, taste great. I actually had one coming on my drive here to Soldier Field, and I first heard about Owen from Chicago Bears quarterback Justin Fields, who follows a plant-based diet. So you can get 20% off your first purchase with code TCA20 at liveowyn.com. That's 20% off your first purchase at liveowen.com. And remember to use the code TCA20. Join me, Justin Fields, Chicago Audible, and try Owen, only what you need. All right, this is Nicholas Moreano, Mason West here at Soldier Field, recapping the 16-13 loss of the Baltimore Ravens. To our right, the Hogan Johns podcast is currently recording their podcast. We can see like their shadow in the window here, so it's kind of funny. But they're recording, we're recording. We probably all want to get the hell out of here too, considering what just happened here at Soldier Field. This is where we usually do, a quick recap, special teams, their final thoughts. Cairo Santos missed another field goal. This has become a thing, I guess, even though the one in Pittsburgh was unrealistic for him to make. 40-yarder, though, where that first drive and, they end up with no points. Mason, is it too soon to say that we're concerned about Cairo Santos, or where are you at with that?
I think especially when you deal with something like a kicker, where it is more of a mental thing than physical, because they've been doing this for so many years for the most part, right? It's boom, 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 you kick, you kick, you kick. It makes me think about Robbie Gould, where he did an interview, I believe it was on the Waddle and Sylvie show, and it was when he had just left the Giants and went to the 49ers. And he said getting cut by the Bears, while it sucked, was one of the best things that happened to him, because he had let the mechanics go, and he had let the mental part kind of overtake him a little bit, and he let him reset and rethink where he needs to be. All that being said, I thought at the time, this is in hindsight, I literally said as they lined up, why the heck are you kicking that in Pittsburgh? Because, when you kick something and you see it fall like 10 yards short, that doesn't help your confidence at all. And then you go out here and you miss a 40-yard, which normally for Cairo is kind of a chip shot. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, it's now near the end of the game. They decided to go for 2 on that one play, and we couldn't figure out why they were doing that, because going for 2 didn't put you in a better position score-wise. It wasn't advantageous. I believe it would have given you 6 points if you had the 2.
Yeah.
If you had just the 1, you're up 5 points. You missed it. You have 3. You have 3. It's just it didn't make any sense. And I wondered, is it because Nagy wasn't confident in Cairo?
Actually, Mason, I just think that someone on the Bears doesn't know how to do math. Like, to be completely honest,
They ran out of fingers.
Like, it happens, but it just, again, go listen to his explanation of it. I just think there was confusion, like in terms of what going for two or kicking the extra point did in terms of putting you up. It just, again, it doesn't make sense what he said.
So long as right now, I don't think we anything to be too worried about at this point in time. He's going to go kick indoors in Detroit, get right next on Thursday. It should be fine.
I agree with you there. So that's your special teams. Well, was there anything else? Oh, there was a blocked punt or partially blocked punt from Pat O'Donnell here, which trying to remember if that equated to any points. I think that was maybe the interception from Tashawn Gibson, which we didn't mention, but good job for Tashawn Gibson to get an INT.
First interception in a while, actually.
Yeah,
so
it's been a while. Yeah, so someone need to create some turnovers for the Bears defense, but that also happened on special teams. And then you also saw I don't know why, but you saw Khalil Herbert returning kicks. You saw Jakeem Grant kind of get mixed in there. I don't know if that's just because Khalil Herbert's not being really utilized as much on offense. They want to give him some opportunities.
I know we're now on special teams, but really quickly back to the offense. Why would Nagy not have seen what Herbert did and said, we need to do more of what Cleveland does in terms of how they balance their running backs, that 1-2 punch they have of Hunt and Chubb. Instead, over the last 2 weeks, Herbert has now had 5 carries. And you're like, what? And so now, maybe I would assume you're right. That's why you threw him back there like, hey, let's get him a touch. You know how do you give him a touch? Hand him the dang ball.
That's a really good point. Like, they obviously had played a team that, would have a tandem with running backs, but yet they just don't do that. There was actually on the first drive, there was maybe it was a play where you saw Herbert and Montgomery out on there, but that's not.
How many of those fake jets did we see Herbert do?
Oh my God. Yeah. He would line up out wide and, go in motions. Like, that's the guy that you want doing that. Like, look, Demir Bird's there for a reason. Just make him do the fake jet sweeps because he's not going to really do much elsewhere. But yeah, just again, the things that just don't make sense with this Bears team. You can have a long, long list that would extend from this press box all the way onto the freaking field at this point. But that's another day.
Yeah, but back to what you were saying about the block punt. I said that for the first two. I'm like, his punts look weird. I don't know. It was the way he was holding him. It was the spin on him. They didn't have a lot of lift when you were actually watching it live. It kind of died a little bit. And lo and behold, I believe that was probably the third, if not the fourth punt, it gets blocked. Pat O'Donnell, punter, another position that could and honestly probably should be in flux.
No, I agree with you there, Mason. We have Cliff saying, I think Nagy's getting desperate and reaching for anything that might work. He's not on top of the game. Cliff, he has. I don't think he's been ever. Well, I guess you can arguably say 2018 where they didn't know much about him, but yeah, he's definitely on.
What was the name of the coach in Waterboy?
Oh man, I'm blank. But
I think everyone knows I'm talking about. Like, right, he was like this genius coach, and then he got his mojo stolen, and now all of a sudden he can't even drop a play. Like, go back to 2018, like how far we've fallen, like Santa's Sleigh and some of those just really, Willy Wonka and all those real fun plays. And yes, they were usually, inside the 10, just something to kind of like keep the players interested in things like that. But like Cliff had just said, if he's getting desperate, he's reaching for anything. He has the big BU on his card, but is he being him anymore? Like, and he's searching for who he is, and so is the team.
With those plays, there was creativity. On the 4th and 1 Wildcat running with David Montgomery, there was no creativity because you showed your hand as soon as you put that formation out there. So it's really the exact opposite. And that's, again, one of those parts of the problems of this, jigsaw that the Bears are currently right now that nobody can solve. But Mason, it's five losses in a row. You have a game on Thursday.
Maybe against another backup.
Maybe against another backup. We know how that goes for the Bears and playing backup quarterbacks. So this will be our 2-minute warning without the ticker, just to kind of wrap things up here at Soldier Field. Mason, I'll give it to you. What are you kind of thinking about? Where's your mind at with this team and what's about to happen in a couple days?
Well, and I feel like I would be doing a disservice to the podcast if I didn't go back and talk about my Justin Fields injury thoughts. It's hard to say right now. So it wasn't a direct play that made it seem like, okay, this is why he has a rib injury. It wasn't like there was a hard hit. The one I believe he came out after the play we talked about earlier, the fake pass to Montgomery and then the scramble. With that, I wouldn't think there's a fracture. I would think it might be more of like a intercostal or an oblique strain, and that would be more likely like he shouldn't be playing. Could you play on a Thursday after 5 days rest? Sure, you could. But should you? No. I mean, it's going to be more of a pain thing than anything. It's not like he's going to make anything that much worse by doing it. But more likely than not, that's usually like a 3-week recovery kind of a thing. So if it were me, and I was on that medical staff, I'd be like, hey, look, let Andy go out there. It's a short week. Try to beat up on the Lions, hopefully, and let Justin get 2 weeks at least of rest. And then you can have a conversation for the following week about him playing versus if you run him out there, I mean, you're going to run into some problems.
This is someone who knows what he's talking about here in terms of injuries. And you got to also put this together. Like that's behind the offensive line that Justin Fields is currently have to play against. I don't know if you want to risk that. Like if the goal is to still get him to play this season, and you're already at 3-7, it's like you got to obviously the severity of the injury and what it actually is going to play into what the status of Justin Fields will be for Thursday. But you got to definitely keep that in mind as you're going into that divisional game against the Detroit Lions. But just to kind of make this quick, what happened today is a fireable offense. No doubt about it. There's no reason the Bears – given the whole circumstance of the game, and it sounds like it's getting loud over there with the whole
getting heated.
So, maybe we got to turn it up here. This 2-man order. No, but it's unacceptable in all areas, even for Matt Nagy's standards as a head coach of the Bears, where you have a MVP quarterback not playing in this game, and Tyler Huntley is inserted, and you allow him to come back in this game to ultimately win it. Your offense coming out of a bye week does absolutely nothing in the first half. Unacceptable things continue to happen here at Soldier Field, Hallis Hall with the Bears organization, and nothing's being done about it. At one point, what do they have to do? Like, how bad do you have to lose? Who do you have to lose to ultimately, for whoever is in charge, George McCaskey, whatever, Ryan Pace, whatever it may be, to make change? Because what happened here at Soldier Field to the Ravens with Tyler Huntley, that I would think that would cause that change to happen. It's not. There's no way. Obviously, on a short week, you're going to see Matt Nagy. You're going to see the same old clowns going back in there and trying to win number 4 in the season. So it's unacceptable, and I'll leave it at that. Any kind of final thoughts here, Mason? Anything that you want to add here?
So to add to what you just said there, no, you can't let Matt Nagy go on a short week. I mean, this is the worst timing to have something like that occur because, in theory, let's say they beat the Lions or even let's go crazy and say they blow out the Lions. Now, all of a sudden, the feeling changes. But I would like to bring up the tweak to the Rooney Rule, right, where teams will be allowed to interview for a head coach or in really any position during the final 2 weeks of the regular season with the consent of the employer club, as long as the head coach job is vacant. Those interviews can be done virtually. They did this in theory to make the minority hirings greater. I mean, I don't really know if that is true, but what it does for a club like the Bears, if you let someone go and there's always the problem where like, oh, I'd love to interview that coach for Kansas City. Mm-hmm. Let's say it was Eric Bieniemy. He's fallen out of vogue a little bit, but I can't do it because they're in the playoffs, right? You're going to hire someone who's good, and usually they're in the playoff race. Now you can do that, but the head coach job has to be open in those final 2 weeks. Now, we're not there yet, but you got to make that decision at some point so you can at least kind of get your ducks in a row. So, when that 2 week mark hits, but you are doing those virtual interviews right away.
And that's a fantastic point there, Mason, because nothing that we have seen this season, go back to last season, go back to the year before, should tell you Matt Nagy's the answer. Nothing should tell you that, because if anything, Justin Fields has made Matt Nagy look better as a coach, probably just with his performances. So that should be something that the Bears, if they were smart, if they wanted to enact change, should look to implement to make that vacant, make the head coaching position vacant in terms or available and utilize this new rule, because if you keep on track with this, we're not going anywhere. This is just going to keep repeating year after year, and you're wasting a talent that Justin Fields we've seen flashes of. They'd be probably more consistent if we had somebody that was just a little bit more confident. But you can't get that with the current coaching regime. So that's where we're at. Bears lose 16-3, fall to 3-7 on the season. And you're going to hear from Mason and I pretty quickly. I think we're planning on Tuesday to do the preview show, and there will be a game on Thursday, and we'll be doing all this all over again. But really appreciate everybody who tuned in live, and for your patience. Honestly, went to some of the press conferences afterwards, but really appreciate everybody tuning in here. But that's it from Mason and I here at Soldier Field. So until next time, bear down, Chicago.